Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Justin the Food Entrepreneurs Podcast. I'm Justin Bizzarro. I'm your host. And today I have with us Charlotte Swancy of Riverview Farms in Ranger, Georgia. How are you doing today, Charlotte?
I'm great. How are you, Justin?
I'm doing very well. It's bright and early here in Colorado. I got my coffee going and I'm half awake, but that's the farm life. I myself grew up on a horse farm, which is probably much different than the farm we're talking about with you in Riverview Farms. And if I'm correct, I believe you guys do work with Pine Street Market. Is that correct?
Yes, we do.
And that's how we sort of got into communication. So I do want to get into that in this episode. And actually, Pine Street Market's episode 5, for anyone that's listening in and wants to go back and look at it, with Rusty Bowers. And it's actually one of our most popular episodes. I believe it has the 3rd most downloads and streams of all the episodes we've released so far. So that's pretty impressive. But anyway, so Charlotte, tell us a little bit about how you got into farming and how you became an entrepreneur and sort of the things you guys do on Riverview Farms.
Well, let's see. When I was at University of Georgia, finishing up my chemistry degree, I met my husband, who was also in the chemistry department, and we would go visit his family's farm. And it's a beautiful place. And his dad was growing commodity crops at that time, corn and soybeans and wheat, and he was about to lose the farm. And because the prices, this was in 1999, so commodity farmers were really struggling. So, and about that time in Georgia, organic was taking off. So the certified organic idea and direct marketing thing was just fledgling markets at that time. But after visiting the farm, I thought it was tragic that there was nothing that could be done to save it. And so I convinced my husband, we were just newlyweds, to move to the farm and let's try to save it and do something different. So we immediately started growing vegetables, and we got certified organic on some of the land that his dad hadn't farmed in a while. And we began doing little markets. This one little market in Atlanta. And at that time, restaurants were just catching on to buying local produce and things like that. And so we started direct marketing everything directly to chefs. And then after growing vegetables for a few years, I said, we need animals again. All of this requires animals. And so we decided to raise pigs again. His dad had been in the pig business back in the 80s, and the price of pork dropped in the 90s, so he got out of it. So we had the infrastructure there to do pigs again, but we wanted to do heritage breed pigs. And so we started raising some Berkshires and some other, heritage pigs, and started experimenting with the different chefs around town, around Atlanta. We're about an hour from Atlanta, so it makes doing deliveries and doing fresh meat very easy. So our location of our farm is we're fortunate in that capacity. So we started selling to the chefs, and it just kind of bloomed and grew, and we evolved and added beef. And so we've been doing this now for 19 years.
Okay. And I actually have a question, just because I want to go back, and I don't mean to interrupt you in the middle of it, but can you, because we haven't actually talked about it on this podcast, although we've had some conversations about organic, but you mentioned there was soil that was unused and that it had, that you were able to get it certified organic. So let's talk about what organic actually means and how you get a piece of land certified organic, because I think there's a really deep question there that I find hugely interesting.
So when you first become certified organic, if your farm has been farmed, you have to take a transition period. It takes 3 years for it to transition into organic. And what that means is you have to farm the land transitionally, and you farm it, keep your records, do everything organically, but you can't yet sell it as certified organic. So on some of the croplands that we were phasing into organic at that time, we started selling those commodity crops as transitional, but we had upland that he hadn't been farming for, never been farmed. And so we were able to immediately get those acres certified organic. And then we transitioned the farm pretty quickly thereafter to where it's now all certified organic and has been for 19 years. So that's how you have to transition your crops in there. And so when a farmer wants to become certified organic, you have to look at the land, look at the past management practices, and document that. And then if they've never been farmed, you can go ahead and put it in certified organic. If not, you have to wait the 3 years.
And so who's the authority in Georgia then that comes and I assume they test the soil. Is that how they make sure that it's organic over the 3 years? And so are you regulated then on a regular basis to be certified organic?
We're inspected every year. We do soil samples. The certifier we use is out of Florida, and they come and inspect once a year. You have to keep records of your farm plan. What are you, everything that you do, you have to keep records of it. What fertilizer, manures, when did you apply your manure? When did you, where did you buy your seed? Were they organic seeds? And what, did you apply any fungicides? Those types of, every little thing you do has to be documented, and you have to do crop rotations. And when your certifier and your inspector comes to inspect you, you have to show them all your records and your receipts. And, it's a mountain of paperwork.
It's just like, so it's like an audit, I guess, in some ways. And the other part of the food service world is that we call them audits, but it's where they go through all of our temperature logs and all of our tracking and where everything comes from and what farm it comes from and all of that. So I love this topic because I think it's so important that people really understand what it takes to be organic and why it costs more, at least right now, and why if we demand more of it, we can actually balance things out and bring more organics into our households, because it's just such a better way of farming and what you guys are doing.
Right.
And it's just such a healthier way of consuming food as human beings. And it's really the best practices, in my opinion, in being in food for my entire life, basically, is that the human body just does better with that type of food. And when you buy food closer to home that's sustainably grown, it's out of the ground less amount of time, it's off the tree a less amount of time, so the nutritional value of it is actually doesn't deplete just like it goes rotten. The same thing happens with the nutrition, as we're finding out, at least in my part of the business. So I think it's amazing that you guys are doing it. And so my question is this: can you take the manure from the pigs and from the cows and then reuse that for the vegetables, or does it have to go through a certain process?
Oh, no. Well, you have to apply it at least 120 days before harvest, unless you keep meticulous composting records and turn it. But we do utilize our manure. We apply it well over 120 days before we harvest any of our crops. And but because we have a full circle farm, so we try to utilize, we grow the corn that feeds the pigs, and the pigs fertilize the corn. So we try to keep as much as possible, on the farm as we can. And so that all of that benefits soil health and animal health and people health. And so that's just how we look at our farm, and we do our farm.
And I think that's amazing. So I'm going to come back to the full circle farming thing because I love it, and I think it's hugely interesting for the audience to know and understand what it takes and the effort that you guys put in. But you mentioned heritage pigs and raising heritage pigs and Berkshire heritage pigs. So, let's talk about pigs a little bit. We haven't talked about it on this podcast, but the different variations of pigs and why. And I know they're the best quality pigs, but why you chose those type of pigs, and why they're, in most opinions, the best type of pigs to grow and raise, and then obviously consume.
Well, in choosing and selecting the breeds that we chose, we were talking to the chefs and what they were looking for, and we tried different pigs to see what was the eating quality of these different breeds of pigs. Berkshire has a beautiful coloration in their meat. It's just red, almost like beef, just deep, beautiful red color, and there's nice marbling in the meat, so the fat's intramuscular, and the eating quality of that breed is just phenomenal. And so we also do a Duroc as well. They have really good eating qualities and the mothering abilities. So we look at how these, because we raise the farrow to finish, that we actually have mama pigs, and not just buying feeder pigs and feeding them out. We actually do it from birth till we take them to the slaughterhouse. Some farms will just buy feeder pigs. But in selecting the breeding, we are looking at mothering abilities and eating qualities. And the Berkshires are just a really good breed for that. And we just really like the eating. They're so good. The flavor is just so amazing.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think most consumers don't understand the difference in pork products because it's not like at the store they really identify it. In most grocery stores, it's just a pork chop or bacon. They don't always identify what kind of pig it's coming from, what kind of farming it's coming from and things like that. Although I'm hoping we're going to a world where we get more specific, because the quality in pork and in beef and in fruits and vegetables is so different. And we do label organics in the grocery stores. It's the smallest section by far of the vegetables and fruits, but it's compared to the other sections of fruits and vegetables. But I think that it's so important that we actually diversify our palate in food and try different types of pork and different types of beef, because you don't get what you guys are producing at a normal grocery store. So if someone goes out and gets it, at Pine Street Market or the Chop Shop there in Atlanta, Georgia, it's the quality and the taste and the texture is so amazing. Like, it's really high quality. So I love what you guys are doing there with the pigs. That's why I wanted to ask and tell the audience, because it's just different. So, let's continue the pig conversation again, because I'm just so fascinated. And so then the pigs, you grow the food that's fed to the pigs on the farm. So, what type of food do they eat? And how do you, how old does a pig get before it's time to go to be butchered in order, what's the right timing? And then you mentioned also that you birth pigs, I believe, on the farm and breed. Is that part of the process? So tell us about that and how that all works. And is there I know I grew up on a horse farm, so you're going to have to excuse my terms. But is there a stallion pig that has the best?
The boar.
The boar. Yeah, there you go. The boar that is the best one that is for breeding. So tell us about that, because I think it's so fascinating.
Wow, there's a whole lot there. So, are we going to talk about breeding?
Yep, let's talk about breeding.
When we're looking at meat pigs, which is, you're looking for the carcass that's going to do the best. And sometimes there's a show pig world, which is, it's kind of like show dogs. Those pigs are not necessarily the best for breeding. So we've had a hard time finding breed stock that didn't come from the show pig world. Because we have to find boars that actually know how to work. Because in the industry, most of the pigs are artificially inseminated. They're not actually getting to do what pigs love to do. You have a human doing all the taking semen and putting it into the female pig. But on our farm, the pigs get to work. They get to have fun. And so
they get to make bacon.
Boards, they have to be able to do the job.
Yeah.
And so, that's what. Then they're in the pasture and they get to roam around and do their pig thing. So we let pigs express themselves in nature.
I know, and I think that's an amazing thing, and it's a much happier lifestyle for the animals. Just being able to do that, and it happens naturally versus forcing it. Obviously, which what you do through artificial insemination. And I know that same with the horses. Like you had artificial insemination, and you had just letting it be the way it was, and so it's interesting. And I think it's so important that, the pigs are out there, and I assume they're all are they pasture raised? Is that the proper term?
Yeah, they are pasture raised. They do spend the last month, we kind of keep them a little less pastured so that they can not run off. You want them to stay kind of eating all the time. So we had to have a little spa for them, but they still have access to roam and do their thing, but you just kind of limit their range. But yeah, pigs are just fascinating, amazing creatures.
Yeah, they're awesome. And they come in so many different sizes and shapes and breeds. I mean, people don't realize, there's probably as many, I don't know if it's true or not, but it's like dog breeds or cats. There's so many different kinds, so it's pretty interesting.
There's so many different kinds. Some of them are really fatty, some of them are really lean, and they're not really white meat, and they're not supposed to taste like chicken. Some are better for bacon, some are better for lard. Some have better hams. They're incredible animals.
I know the diversity, and there's all sorts of different kinds and people's palates and all that, but I love what you guys are doing. So now that we've sort of gotten the pasture raised, so talk to me about what you mean by full circle farming. As much detail as possible how you do it on your farms, and let's use the pigs as the example, just because that seems to be where my fascination is going. So I'm just going to lead the audience towards the pigs. And
well, so this time of year, we'll have already taken their manure back in January and spread it over the field that we're going to grow the corn for the pigs to eat on. So this time of year, we're spending time getting the fields prepped to grow corn for the pigs to eat. Just about 100 acres. And so the pigs are enjoying themselves outdoors, and the mama pigs are raising up their piglets that they've just hatched out, and we'll be weaning some soon. And then, as we progress through the summer, we're growing their crops. We're growing the crops for pigs. We're growing the crops for the people that are going to eat vegetables. And around the fall, it's time to harvest all the corn that the pigs are going to be living on. And then that goes into a bin. We also do cows, too. So we have cows grazing all year on the pastures, managing the grasslands, maintaining the soil health. Because it takes all these animals to help you manage the farm. And then meanwhile, the people are trying to manage all the pigs. And then we have to harvest the pigs on a weekly basis. We take them to the slaughterhouse once a week. And we have to sell them. We sell weekly fresh meat to chefs and individuals and Pine Street and the chop shop. It's pretty simple. What we do is pretty simple. The animals fertilize and manage the land, and we manage the manure and the animals. That's our pretty simple circle. And we feed thousands of people every week off of what we do.
How many acres do you guys have?
We farm about, we do rent some land as well, but we farm about 1,000 acres total. But most of that is pasture. And then, but we do probably about a couple hundred acres of row crops to feed the animals.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that Pine Street Market, when they won the category for best condiment for their Pine Street Market bacon jam, that's your pig's bacon in it as well. I just want to make a side notice.
That's our pig, yes.
Yeah, so as again, back to episode 5 and Rusty Powers, but he did win the best condiment category at Flavor of Georgia this year, and I just wanted to make a note to the audience that was your bacon or your pig's bacon in the category, so or in the bacon jam that helped win that category. So I thought it was awesome. I was a judge there, and I did actually absolutely love the bacon jam, and I love the whole concept of what you guys are doing on your farm and how it actually carries over to what Rusty's doing, which is don't waste anything, reuse everything, full circle, as we just talked about, which is why I wanted to talk about the bacon jam also, is because he had bits and pieces left over from the whole bacon he was using, and he didn't want to throw it away or waste food, so he created a bacon jam. You know, one, you don't want to lose anything in the food business because loss is money, but the real thing is he didn't want to waste food, so I thought that was pretty amazing also. Just as a side note.
Yeah, it's a great partnership because, you know, he gets the best pork, and then he turns it into some of the best, you know, charcuterie and the bacon jam, and he won an award for his bacon as well. So it's a really great full circle.
Yeah, and he has great sausage products as well, again, from your pigs, and as well as the bacon. He was in Flavor of Georgia for that as well, and that was a phenomenal product, I remember. And, you know, so it's just such a cool thing to now, you know, because for the audience, and I want to have both you guys back on. I've talked to Rusty about this, but because you guys have now combined to do a joint venture, which is the Chop Shop in Atlanta, which is really awesome in my opinion. You've taken the chef and the butcher shop, which was Rusty's, but combined it into a better concept, and you guys sharing sort of the profitability of your farm and of his, you know, I want to say restaurant, but it's more than that. So I don't know how to describe it. It's like a butcher shop, but you can eat there, and it's an incredible concept. So how did you, I mean, we'll talk about it more in another episode, but I want to give a little teaser. I mean, was it Rusty's idea to come to you guys, or is it something you guys just talked about? Hey, you know, we can make more money off of our animals and our products if we go straight to the consumer. So tell me a little bit about how you guys decided to do Chop Shop.
Well, yeah, Rusty, we had been working with Rusty, and how did that even come to pass? I think we were just talking about how we definitely needed more retail. I've been doing little farmers markets for so long, and farmers markets are great, but you only get 50 chances to get it right, because it's only one day a week, and it's only 4 hours. So you really don't have much of a chance to get to sell your product. And also, I couldn't sell fresh products. I could only sell frozen at the farmers markets. And so after being in business for this long, you want to be able to sell your product the best way. And so Rusty recognized that, and we just said, well, let's do a retail shop. We've got to do it. And here we are, finally, through all the hurdles, we're finally open.
And I don't want to dive into any more detail, because I really want to do an episode with just the two of you on the shop itself. But I think it's so awesome that you guys did it and came together and brought your two, specialties together, and your two, the things you do best together to form another business and partner and put products out there. Because, like I said, I don't think there's your pigs and your cows coming in and meeting Rusty's creativity and then also just being available on a retail side and doing more of a retail shop. I think it's a great idea, and I have not been to the chop shop yet. Deborah and I are definitely going to get there one of these days on our trips to Atlanta, but hopefully soon, hopefully before we do the episode, so I have a little information to talk about. But it's really cool that you guys did it. So I'm going to backtrack. I just wanted to go off on a side note about that, because the bacon jam and the not wasting and the full sucker farming. But let's talk about all the things that you guys do. What all the products that you grow on the farm, all the animals that you raise, just so the audience has an idea of the complexities of your life in being a farming entrepreneur in the way that you guys are.
Well, yeah, so we raise pigs. We also raise beef, and we do vegetables. We grow corn and to mill into grits and cornmeal and polenta, as well as making, animal feed for our animals. And this year we'll be starting a hemp project. So we stay busy on the farm.
What was that project again?
This year?
Yes.
So this year we're going to be growing some hemp in Tennessee. This milk is not legal to grow yet in Georgia, so we're going to start a hemp project if we don't have enough to do. But we'll be starting that project this summer.
Well, being in Colorado, I'm all for that. I think there's and being a pioneer and you guys figuring it out, I think that's a huge insight, because it is the future and it is part of the food world also, not only from what hemp does, but also from the point of view, the medicinal purposes that are happening in food because of hemp and marijuana and things like that. So I actually really love that you guys are doing that, and that's part of what you're doing. And I think good luck on that for sure. We'll probably have to get you back on and hear all about that adventure in a year from now.
How it turns out for fall.
Yeah, no, definitely. And so I want to go back. You said vegetables. So what type of vegetables do you guys grow? What are all the varieties and things like that?
Oh gosh, you name it, we've grown it. I mean, it's from tomatoes to, well, we don't do strawberries anymore. It's way too labor intensive. And the way the climate's changed, it's difficult to grow strawberries for us where we are in Georgia. But we grow tomatoes and sweet corn and field peas. Southern pea is something that I just love to grow. Watermelons, you name it, we grow it. Winter squash, garlic. Our garlic is pretty famous. So, yeah.
And so
we've been operating a 200-member CSA for, 19 years now. We've been doing a vegetable CSA, community-supported agriculture.
And so, okay, let's talk. So you've been farming. How long have you actually now? You talked about your husband when you were newlyweds, going and buying the farm. So how long have you been running the farm now and been sort of these organic entrepreneurs? It's been 20 years. I think you said 1999.
We'll be married 20 years this year. We've been farming 19.
So it hasn't been all. It hasn't always been the chop shop and the growth in that. So, what are some of the hardships that you've had just trying to get this business off the ground or going out and getting people to recognize organic products?
Well, I mean, for us, we were fortunate when we started. The timing was right for when we started it. And so it wasn't too difficult to get into it or to sell what we had, because when we started, and there wasn't a lot of other farmers doing what we do, and so we were able to grow as the chefs started getting more involved. We were able to grow for them, but I was never really shy. I was always willing to just approach a chef and say, hey, I've got some tomatoes. You want to try them? It's probably a little more difficult to get into it now because there are so many farmers doing what we do. But we were fortunate when we started, the timing was right, and so it wasn't too hard to do it. The difficulties that we've run across is with some of the missing infrastructure, finding a good slaughterhouse close by the farm, finding, doing your own distribution, finding good labor, those types of things are always, regulations that surround food and meat are always making it a little more cumbersome and difficult. The weather really has been our major pitfall in recent years.
And that is just so the audience knows. I mean, that's because Georgia you've had colder weather than historically normal there. Is that correct?
Wetter. It's really, we had really intense storms. We had a tornado that hit us one year in December, and we have had this past year was extremely wet. It didn't rain. It didn't quit raining for months. So we've had a lot of flooding. We've had a lot of weird droughts. So it's just been extremes. So like one summer it didn't rain for 5 months. We're fortunate to be on a river so we can irrigate, but yet the weather extremes are what's really swinging out of control for where we are in Georgia. And that makes it difficult. If you have somewhat temperate, where you can kind of guess, okay, it might rain for a few weeks, but it's gonna turn dry and we'll be fine. And then it'll rain again. But no, it's more like monsoon drought. And that's really hard to work with.
Yeah, I can't imagine what that would. I mean, it's because it's totally out of your control, number one, and number two, then you're trying to figure out what produce and what items you can grow amongst the variation of the weather patterns. I mean, I don't even know. I mean, it's like a constant moving target, and I don't know how you guys deal with that. So that's got to be interesting.
Well, you have to figure out how to work with other farmers so they can fill in the gaps. And so, you work out different collaborations and, because one farmer might have lost all their tomatoes, but they have a bumper crop of cucumbers. And you just kind of, have to collaborate with other farmers. Because I never look at other farmers as competition. There's so few of us. You have to look at it more like, how can we all collaborate and help each other through all this difficult stuff.
Yeah, understandable. And I think that's and something that we've talked about on this podcast, where it's not always just because there's a farm down the street in this example that they're competition, because sometimes you need competition, to fill gaps because it's better for your industry. Competition can help build an industry, but it also helps you perform better and helps you fill gaps and know what you're good at and what they're good at, and then both sort of, excel there as well. And I find the thing on the Georgia and the weather just interesting as well, because Deborah and I have been working there now for 4 years, and one of the things we're trying to do there is make sure we work with all of you guys as farmers in getting products directly from the farms, into central Georgia to process and turn into food to go, or package or whatever, or wash or whatever needs to be done to go into Georgia schools and Georgia universities and Georgia hospitals. So that the whole Georgia Grown program, for example, is a big deal. And we've sort of come in because we're trying to centralize all of it and then push it back out, because so much Georgia grows so many crops and has so many farmers, yet there's, for lack of a better term, food from other states and Mexico being imported into Georgia, even though there's enough in the state of Georgia to really sustain the entire population of Georgia, which is about 10 million people. So it's one of the things I love talking to you guys. Go ahead.
It's a distribution problem. I mean, it's the way supermarkets have set up their distribution channels is what creates the problem. And supermarkets themselves, supermarkets are convenient, they're wonderful. However, they do create distribution problems. So a farmer in South Georgia may not be anywhere near a distribution channel for Kroger or something like that. So how does he get his stuff to that market and be able to make a living doing it? And that's really the problem. And, how do you solve that? And that's, how do we form a distribution channel in Georgia that is a Georgia distribution hub, and make that successful? And I think Georgia Grown is working to help that.
Yeah, and I think as part of what we're doing there, because we've been brought in by the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Economic Development in the governor's office to actually help do that. And Gary Black, who anyone who doesn't know on the podcast, is the commissioner of the Department of Agriculture, and I believe he's the brains around the whole Georgia Grown program in the first place. I know he has a lot of help in his department, but I believe he's the one who created all of it. I don't know that for a fact, though, but
I can't remember when that started. I'll have to look that one up.
Yeah, but I mean, so I just think the whole thing that's going on there for you guys as Georgia farmers is quite incredible. And you're right, it is a logistics problem. It's a huge logistics problem, and a lot of it is how much food is wasted just because it's not being used, or it's not being able to enter into the grocery store chains or into the distribution chains properly because of lack of logistics and things like that.
School change, even into the school system.
Yeah.
I remember schools used to have, many of the school lunchrooms would have canning programs in the summer so that people could bring their items to be canned and things like that. Those don't exist anymore. Many of the school lunchrooms don't even cook or prepare food. It comes in from a big multinational corporation like Aramark or something, and they're not necessarily using local food. So, I mean, there's just there's infrastructure gaps where we just don't have the infrastructure to set up and do what we used to do to support our farmers. So it's a big challenge.
I'm totally off on a tangent, but I like what we're talking about, because one of the things you just mentioned is like an Aramark or a Sodexo. What happens with them is they use like big broadliner companies and they get rebates, but that doesn't, and they deal with these big multinational corporations, like you said, or national corporations that they do deals with to get rebates. And then, so they distribute all over the country the same products. And, in the schools, it's, okay, here's a tray of mac and cheese. All the person has to do is put it in the oven. versus using a cheese that comes from Georgia, to make a mac and cheese? Or how about not frozen hamburgers from, 50 miles away or whatever? That's a bad example. It'd be more like 500 miles away. And actually using fresh ground beef instead of frozen, and actually using Georgia ground beef in the school. So it is something that, we're working on for the last 4 years, and trying to coordinate that logistics thing has been an incredible journey. It's taken way longer than I ever expected, but it's because it is so complicated and there is so many farms. But the other thing is, and people don't realize, is the reason I asked you about all the vegetables and fruits and stuff on your farm and animals is Georgia can actually grow such a diverse group of fruits and vegetables and animals compared to other states. I think California is probably the only other one I know of that has the diversity that you guys have. So talking to you guys as farmer is pretty amazing, because you guys grow so much, and other people are like, there's other states that grow it, but it's not the whole as much ability year round. And when you talked about the weather, in some ways the weather helps with that, but I can see also why changing weather patterns why the weather is changing. That's for a different podcast and a scientific one, which I am not. But farmers like you in Georgia, I just really feel like there's a good thing coming in getting your products around that. It's one of the reasons I love talking to you guys, because I'm interested. It's all the reason. If I would say I'm giving back, yes, of course, and helping out other entrepreneurs farming and doing it in the right way, I'm like, okay, these are people that I would want to do business with. The care of your animals, the way you let them frolic, on their own, for lack of better, to me, leads to better food, and a better fed animal, and being very much into nutrition and healthy food. And as a company, we thrive across the country in all of our facilities. So it's a huge task based on the volume. Hearing that you guys are doing it and have grown and stuff like that, on this podcast, because I want to focus on you guys. But I would like to obviously continue the conversation. I'd love to be able to procure your products and things like that there. And I think we're going to see something that Georgia's going to be able to do something culture into the schools and into the universities and institutions, and mainly talk about supporting local economies and building economies and rural development and manufacturing, like every other state is, and trying to bring in manufacturers, which Georgia does. What they're really saying is agriculture. We focus on this and bring it into our system instead of importing all this food into our well as once Georgia lifts that up, how it expands to other states and around the world. So just a side note, and I sort of geeked it up there, but I'm like a total nerd when it comes to everyone in Georgia. Like, this is what everyone's doing for the state of Georgia is just so amazing. So now,
I would agree.
Now I got myself all dry mouth, and so because when it comes to food distribution and production, but
I do. I have a 12-year-old son.
12-year-old son. So does he work on the farm?
To, actually like it. Want him to, maybe one day do it if he wants to. But he does help out at market, and he's really good at business. But he does help some. But I don't force him to do intense manure management or anything like that. I want him to enjoy the farm and not hate it.
No, I totally understand that, growing up on a farm myself. And the reason one of the reasons I asked is because obviously you're farming the whole time. So, and both you and your husband are in the business.
He's been right there with me.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's obviously, and he's picking up all of this, and he's learning and seeing you guys grow food and organics and healthy animals, and, what it takes to be, an entrepreneur, really. And I just think it's so huge to pass on. And we talk a lot about, being able to pass on the entrepreneurial journey and farming and stuff to our children, because it's not something that they can learn in school. So I think that's awesome. And that's the whole reason I ask it. And having him find it on his own, I think, is awesome too. It it takes a while. I swore I would never get into food, and I would never get into farming, and I would never do all these things. Even when I was in college, I'm like, I'm not going back to that. And, lo and behold, I am 100% in food and 100% into farming and 100% into the logistics of food, and food's my whole life. And there was a time where I didn't want anything to do with any of it. I'm like, I grew up in it. I don't want to do this, but it was truly what ended up happening deep inside, and it was pretty amazing. So,
I hope my son discovers it himself and wants to be a part of it. So, and he seems to enjoy working,
Yeah, I think
doing things. He loves it, things like that. I think he'll come around.
A 12-year-old's an interesting age. It's a lot of changes going on there as a male, that's for sure. At least from my memories, it was probably my most awkward years, and oh my gosh, just unknowns. So I feel for him. Definitely, those were probably the most awkward years of my growing up. But around that age, the 12 to 14-year-old age, and coming into your own, really.
It's such a weird time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel for them. So, let's talk about let's talk about the farming again a little bit, and when we talked about some of the hardships. So, if you could go back 19 years ago and tell yourself what you know now, or some of the things you wish you knew then, what would they be? I know everyone gets stumped on this question.
What would they be? Maybe take a little more time for yourself. But I don't know. I don't know that I would change anything in the journey. I would definitely say, you know what, it's okay to stop what you're doing and take a few more vacations. Probably what I would tell myself, take a little more time off, even though a farm is so demanding. But I don't know that I would change anything on the journey. I really don't. I think, take more time for myself. That would be it.
No, actually, that's interesting, because one of the things you said is not change anything, because, if you went back and changed anything, obviously it would change where you are now. So I do like that, actually. So what things do you think that are important in being an entrepreneur, and how do you, is it all farmers markets and how you market your product, or is it, how do you have a website, and how do people find you on social media and things like that?
Well, for me, most of our sales are still restaurants. So it's a lot of wholesale to restaurants. The majority of our business. We also do CSA. That's another big part of it, with vegetables and meat. And then the farmers markets are a great way to get everybody on board with what you're doing and educating people every week, and so they can see you and what you're doing, and you can talk about it with them at the farmers market. And the website's just where people go. For me, it's just been where my CSA people sign up. They can read a little bit about the farm. But most of how I've gathered customers has been just talking to people, word of mouth. That's how we've done it. Is people talk about us. We talk about what we do, and Atlanta's a big word of mouth community, so that works. And social media, I can never seem to get it right. But I know it's a thing. A lot of people love to do the Facebook and Instagram, and we're working more and more with that with Chop Shop, because that's kind of how it's driven. But it's good,
Yeah, I'm not very good at it either. Well, I just actually had the whole group of Georgia college students, the marketing graduating seniors, 3 teams, put together marketing plans on how to market the podcast and do the social media and all that, because I'm obviously doing it and doing a fairly decent job. I just have no clue really what I'm doing in that. I mean, I have a lot of expertise in it, and when I say I don't know what I'm doing, I have a really good idea of how to make it succeed and push stuff and all of that. But the thing is things change so rapidly, and as the newer generations come into it, like what is popular and how to post and what hashtags and all of that are just such a moving target that I really actually was looking at them to like, okay, you're the up and coming generation. What is it that you want to see? What is it that you would do? Because, you know, as a person that's been in food and beverage my whole life, and actually as a working professional 19 years, I'm a little out of touch at what would drive them and what's going on. And actually it's really cool in that there is a lot of, wanting healthier food options and wanting healthier options in their universities. And so I thought that was pretty cool, actually, as a side note, because we talked about it. But social media is a whole beast in and of its own. And I probably need to find someone to just do a podcast educational episode on just social media because, I'm going to probably do one and get the Georgia College students to do their own episodes. But it's really very difficult because there's so many different venues and each venue requires something different. And so you're managing all these media channels. And before you used to have a marketer or a marketing department just do it, but we don't need to do that anymore or waste the money. So we do it all of ourselves. But I would say that I do follow you guys on Instagram and on Facebook. And obviously, because you were going to be on the podcast, I wanted to make sure I had my information. But I do think you do a great job on social media. I think, it's harder now with the way the algorithms have changed. So you can't quite touch as many people as you used to, as easily, which is, obviously sad because the only way to do it is to pay for it. And I think it was awesome the way it was before, but that's just me. But I guess everyone's got to make money somehow. And but I think you are, I think you are doing a great job. So, that's one of the reasons I'm like, okay, when I was talking to Rusty and he told me about Riverview Farms and I looked you guys up, I'm like, we need to get them on the podcast. And, and that's why I mentioned you guys on there in the notes, because I'm like, okay, what they're doing in the full circle farming, which Rusty had also mentioned on his, but we didn't get into full details, which is why I wanted to ask you. But it's really cool what you guys are doing. And I think that if more farmers, transition their farms into more full circle farming and less on large scale of a few, fruits and vegetables, which is also why I asked you a variety, because so many out there are just, okay, it's corn this season, soybeans that season, and wheat that season. But it doesn't need to be that way. And people are coming around to what you're doing, and I think it's so cool. And you're 19 years in, so obviously you have a huge advantage. And I do myself remember, the late 90s, early 2000s boom in organics, I would say, or I don't know if it was a boom, or I would call it the pioneering age, although some people have been in it since the 80s and 90s, some of the real pioneers. But I worked on an organic farm as a summer job because I wanted the experience in food and understanding it. And through that, I was like, okay, entrepreneurial attitude, let's do fruit stands and vegetable stands. So that was, so I then, had 4 fruit stands and vegetable stands to sell it on the side of the road, doing my own thing, because I was like, like this is really going to become popular. And people, why not sell it directly to consumers, and people are going to love the thing to do, which is funny because at the same time I was saying I didn't want to be in food and I would never go in the food business, but yet I'm being an entrepreneur and seeing an opportunity and having fruit stands and vegetable stands on the side of the road all throughout Maryland. And so just an interesting side note, you never know. I feel like it's what you said, like opportunity. You guys didn't intend to get in farming. It's just the opportunity came and you guys sort of jumped, into the pool without really knowing what you were doing, I guess, in some ways, and just decided to go for it, which is so many entrepreneurs' journey. There's an opportunity, or it's an accident, or they just do something, and then next thing you know, they're like, okay, people like what I'm doing. And that's what people, when people say do what you love and then you'll make money and be an entrepreneur, I think what really ends up happening is you sort of have an idea of something you love or are passionate about, and maybe it's a hobby, or it's making beef jerky, or it's making jellies and jams, or in your case, trying to save a family business, and you end up there and the path takes you down the entrepreneurial path. It's not something that sort of is just like, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, let's do this. And I mean, there are people out there, but in food and beverage, I feel like it's more like you kind of stumble upon it, and it's kind of sometimes an accident. I would say it's not intended. And, for me, it's always been that way. All the companies we formed and started or whatever, it's sort of like an accident because we stumbled into something and we're like, okay, like we need this for our restaurants. And, oh, no one's offering this for our food trucks or our restaurants. Like, we should create that business, and next thing you know, we're in a point of sale business for iPads and so on and so forth. So it's one of those things where, I think it's probably the same in farming. It's, okay, we can grow cows, like you said, or raise cows. I don't know what the proper term is, actually. I don't know if you grow a cow or you raise a cow. But
you can grow them.
But I think it's really cool what you guys are doing there on the farm. And so anyone who wants to look it up, it's at Riverview Farms, I believe, on Instagram, and it's just so cool. And I'll put a link, obviously, on the episode notes, but I do really appreciate you taking the time to be on here, Charlotte, and share your story.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
And I'm going to reach out to you and Rusty here soon to try to maybe do your episode, and then right after your episode, do an episode on Chop Shop. So maybe I can get you guys coordinated and we can do an episode on that as well, because I think it's so awesome the way the two of you have come together and done a retail store. And I think a lot more people should do what you guys are doing, but I don't want to give away your secrets. And obviously, but it is really cool, and I don't think anyone would ever be able to imitate it, because you guys are so far down the road, and Rusty has so much experience in doing what he's doing now that it's really incredible. So, you can't, as people ask me, am I afraid all the time? Because I'll let people tour the kitchens and take photos and all that, and they're like, oh, you don't worry about people copying you? Here's the reality, and really, it's no one grew up like me. No one grew up doing the business we did. No one understands all the knowledge I have, so they can go try to imitate whatever they want. They're still not you, and that's what I believe with you guys at Riverview Farms and with Rusty. It's like people can try to imitate it. It doesn't matter. It's never going to be you guys, and so I think your quality of your products, again, I just want to emphasize to the audience, is so amazing. So if you want to try the products coming out, obviously they can get it in some of the restaurants around Atlanta. I'll plug Pine Street Market just because they were on the podcast, and then obviously Chop Shop because you guys are doing it together. But seriously, and I believe Rusty ships the product all over the place now. I'll have to go back and check on that. But so you can get it online as well and order those products and the bacon jam and things like that. So full circle farming to full circle consumption. Rusty's using all the parts that he gets as well. So everyone in the audience, try the bacon jam. It's awesome. It was worth winning. And try the bacon and anything else you can from Chop Shop and from Pine Street Market, because they are Riverview Farms products. So thank you again, Charlotte. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. You have a great day.
Thank you. You too. And if everyone in the audience, if you want to be on the podcast or you have any questions, you can reach out to me at justin@thefoodentrepreneurs.com. And this is Justin, the Food Entrepreneurs Podcast. And thank you, everyone, for listening in.